Morrow Road is perhaps one of the most chilling routes you can drive in all of North America. Near Detroit, just across Lake St. Clair, you'll find Clay Township, a small, rural community. Running through it is Morrow Road, a 2-lane strip of paved road lined on both sides by thick woodland. On the surface, it's pretty unassuming, just another dusty trail in the good old US of A, but appearances can be deceiving. It's actually home to a rather chilling urban legend. As the story goes, in 1893, a woman went out in the middle of the night during a snowstorm. Her reason? She was frantically looking for her young son, who had gotten out of the house somehow. The storm was severe that night, and while searching for her child, the woman sadly froze. Neither her nor her son were ever found. Rumour has it that the woman still hangs around Morrow Road though, only in a much more ethereal sense. If you live near the area, here's something you can try for yourself. Legend says that if you drive out to Morrow Road at midnight and park on the old bridge, you can perform a very simple ritual to summon the frozen lady. Simply honk your horn 3 times. Many people say that if you do, the woman will appear to see if you have her son. According to people who claim to have seen her, she'll be wearing a white gown stained red with claret, and her eyes will be missing. If you try to flee, either on foot or in your vehicle, she'll chase after you. If she catches you, it's game over. In the words of one local resident, "I was skeptical of this whole legend, so I got together with some friends and we drove out there one night in 1992. We shut off the car and sat there for a minute. My friend honked the horn a few times, and right away, we heard a baby crying. It was coming from underneath the bridge. We got out of the car, and I leaned over the guardrail. I could hear it crying, but I couldn't see anything. Somewhere, out of the darkness, we heard a woman shout, 'Where's my baby?'
Virgin ghosts are said to be found in older, abandoned buildings and in isolated parts of the forest. They have long, dark hair covering their faces, dressed in all white gowns with no shoes and just a pair of perfectly white, clean socks. The virgin ghosts have also been called Chonogwishin. When encountering one of these entities, it's been said that there will be a drastic change in temperature in the room, giving the potential victim fair warning to leave the area immediately. One urban legend tells of a man who was searching through a building when, suddenly, the room became freezing cold. The man kept on his pursuit until he heard a voice. Not just any voice, but the voice of a virgin ghost. The being then instructed him to close his eyes and count to 100. The man did as he was told until he reached the number 49, when the urge to open his eyes overcame him, and he looked directly at the ghost. That was the last thing the man would ever see. Here is a bit of backstory on where this urban legend came from. Though there are some debates on the true origins, most point to old Korean culture as the culprit of this story. See, back in those days, for a woman to die as a virgin meant she died without a partner and did not produce any offspring. So parents came up with a way to ensure their children would grow up and have families by creating this elaborate legend. Children grew up hearing that if they did not lose their virginity by the time they died, they may too become a virgin ghost, forever haunting the living. It's very peculiar when you think about it. In our society, it isn't typical for parents to encourage their daughters to lose their virginity.
I'm part of an all-female roller derby league. I would wake up at 6, skate around the local basketball court for about 40 minutes, hit the gym, then meet my team around 8. To be a champion at the sport, you have to be more than just fast. You have to be made of stone, and you have to be prepared to knock somebody down at a moment's notice. I've been with the Flying Banshees for about 3 years now. We were at a match against our most hated opponents. It was at this incredibly old and run-down roller rink, As we were tearing around the court, the lights would often flicker on and off like strobe lights. Add the occasional trickle of water from the leaky roof above, and it was by far the most dangerous course we had ever skated on. We really should have called off the match before it even started, but we hadn't driven 3 hours just to quit. Normally, before we start skating, there's a coordinator who checks us over to make sure that we're not carrying anything dangerous or illegal on our person. It's no joke. I recall one time someone had hid a razor blade in their elbow pads. Apparently that day, no one checked the other team, because halfway through the match, as I'm flying around the rink, trying to put some points on the board, I accidentally flew right into a girl on the opposing team, and she hit the ground hard. I didn't hear the whistle, so I kept right on going. You don't get into a sport like this without having to eat some floor sometimes. I've been flattened a few times now, but I always get right up and get right back into the game. As I was coming back around the track, I noticed she was standing back up and leaning against the barrier wall, staring at me with pure hatred. Right before I was just about to pass her, I saw her pull something from under her shirt. I raised both hands instinctively. The lights flickered, and when they came back on, I saw a pocket knife shoved through the palm of my hand. I slowed to a stop, just staring at it in disbelief. Then the pain hit me like a punch to the gut, and I went down. To make a long story short, I was rushed to the emergency room, and the girl was arrested for assault with a deadly weapon. Turns out it wasn't her first offense. My hand was bandaged up, and I was the first one at our next practice. With the brace on my arm, my teammates took to calling me Claw, so at least I got a pretty cool nickname out of it. One thing that still bothers me though, and sometimes I can't help but dwell on it, but if the lights hadn't flickered when they did, would she have planted that knife somewhere far worse than my hand? I'm a female, and this happened during spring break of 2011. At the time, I lived in New Jersey, and I would often drive out to the Pine Barrens on Saturdays and jog along a trail that a friend of mine showed me. I don't mean to be vague, but for the life of me I can't remember the name of this trail, but I do remember that it was located in South Jersey, and from what I understand there's lots of trails that run through that area. During this time, I was going through some health problems, and I was really focused on losing weight. During my jogs, I would often listen to my headphones. I had a playlist on my iPod that would help me get motivated. After parking my car, I set off on foot. I usually saw one or two other backpackers or joggers traversing the trail, but today, there was no one. About 30 minutes after I started, I got this feeling that I was being watched. I tried my best to brush it off as I continued down the path. This feeling became more and more prevalent. It felt like the forest itself was closing in on me. It got to the point where I stopped jogging and took out my headphones and listened carefully. I heard several frantic footsteps coming from behind the surrounding trees. At this point, I was becoming a bit unnerved, but I figured that it could be some kids just messing around. I called out, asking if anyone was there, but got no response. I should mention that on this particular trail, about a half a mile from its starting point, your cell phone was all but useless. After a minute or two of just standing there, I decided that it was time to cut this jog short. As soon as I turned around, I heard a rustling sound from behind me. I turned, and what I saw utterly horrified me. A masked man wearing a pair of boxers emerged from a bush that was alongside the trail. I know that may sound comical to some of you, but I assure you it was not. The mask this person was wearing is kind of hard to describe. It looked like an animal head of some kind, and just sort of hung off this guy's head, like it was several sizes too big for him. The most disturbing part of all was this half-naked maniac was covered in what looked like blood. It was like I was involuntarily thrusted into the plot of a horror movie. I took off running down the trail. As I did, I heard laughter and shouting coming from several directions behind me. I thankfully found my way back to the car in one piece. I drove out of there like a bat out of hell. I pulled over at the nearest gas station and immediately called the police. It took them almost an hour and a half to get out there, and he informed me that he would call in more cops and comb the area. He told me that someone from his department would eventually follow up with me. The next morning, I got a phone call from the police. They, of course, didn't find anyone matching the description I gave. However, they did find the skinned carcass of a deer not far from where I had encountered the man. I don't have confirmation on this, but thinking back to how strange that mask looked, I have to ask a question. Was that man wearing fresh deer skin?